Most people think cheesecake is just a simple dessert, a creamy slice, a sweet treat at the end of dinner. But what most people never realize is that somewhere in the world, cheesecake is produced on an almost unbelievable scale. Not in a small bakery, not even in a large restaurant kitchen. We're talking about enormous production lines where thousands of cheesecakes move through the system every single hour. And the strange part is that when you finally see one on a plate, it still looks like something made slowly by hand in a quiet kitchen. Behind the scenes, however, the reality is very different. Massive machines, stainless steel production lines, and carefully controlled systems running almost nonstop. Teams of workers watch every step of the process, checking textures, inspecting surfaces, and making sure every cheesecake meets strict quality standards before it ever leaves the line. It all begins with a surprisingly delicate step, the batter. Smooth, creamy cheesecake filling flowing into molds with precise measurements that have to be exactly right. From above, the view is almost hypnotic. Hundreds of identical cheesecakes moving perfectly in sync, traveling through a production system designed for incredible efficiency. Ovens operate continuously. Conveyor belts stretch across massive industrial kitchens, and every part of the process has to work flawlessly together. Because even a tiny error here doesn't ruin one dessert. It could ruin thousands at the same time. And that's why the texture matters so much. That dense, creamy interior that makes cheesecake famous around the world. Behind that single slice is an entire industrial operation most people never see. A system built to supply one of the most popular dessert brands on the planet. But the real surprise isn't how the cheesecake tastes. It's how many are actually made every single day inside the massive bakeries powering the Cheesecake Factory. Long before massive factories and global dessert brands existed, cheesecake was something much simpler. It was a homemade dessert, mixed in quiet kitchens and baked slowly in family ovens. In the 1950s, many cheesecake recipes lived inside handwritten notebooks. Cream cheese, eggs, sugar, and maybe a little vanilla. The ingredients were simple, but the result felt special. Every cheesecake depended on patience. The batter had to be smooth. The oven temperature had to stay steady. And if the timing was wrong, the entire dessert could crack. For decades, cheesecake remained mostly a homemade treat. But slowly, that began to change. Small bakeries started selling it. Restaurants realized customers loved it. And over time, cheesecake transformed from a family dessert into one of the most popular items on restaurant menus. Few companies embraced that opportunity like the Cheesecake Factory. What began as a small family bakery eventually grew into a restaurant brand famous for its enormous menu and its legendary cheesecakes. Walk into one of their restaurants today, and you'll see display cases filled with colorful slices. Classic New York style, chocolate, strawberry, caramel. Dozens of flavors served to millions of customers every year. But this popularity created a challenge. How do you supply hundreds of restaurants with the exact same cheesecake every single day? Making one cheesecake in a kitchen is easy. Making thousands is something completely different. Because once demand reaches a certain level, small ovens and handwritten recipes are no longer enough. Behind the restaurants, far away from the dining rooms customers see, massive bakeries now operate around the clock. Delivery trucks arrive with tons of ingredients. Workers unload supplies. Industrial facilities run carefully controlled production systems. And when you finally see these bakeries from above, the scale becomes clear. This isn't just baking anymore. It's one of the largest dessert production operations in the world. And inside these factories, the number of cheesecakes produced every day is far bigger than most people would ever imagine. Before a single cheesecake reaches the oven, the real scale of this operation already becomes clear with the ingredients. Every day, enormous deliveries arrive at the bakery. Trucks unload pallet after pallet of cream cheese, stacked high inside refrigerated warehouses to keep everything perfectly fresh, and the numbers are staggering. Producing cheesecake at this level requires tons of cream cheese, thousands of eggs, and massive quantities of sugar, cream, and other ingredients every single day. But simply having the ingredients isn't enough. Everything has to be measured with extreme precision. Inside the mixing rooms, huge stainless steel machines wait to combine everything together. These industrial mixers are nothing like the small bowls used in home kitchens. Each machine can hold hundreds of gallons of batter at once. Workers carefully load the ingredients into the tanks. Cream cheese blocks are added first, then sugar, eggs, and heavy cream follow in carefully controlled amounts. Even the eggs are processed by automated cracking machines capable of handling thousands every hour. Once everything is inside, the mixing begins. Massive rotating paddles slowly start turning, blending the ingredients into the smooth, creamy batter that cheesecake is known for. From the outside, the machines look calm and controlled, but inside the tanks, hundreds of pounds of ingredients are constantly moving, folding, and mixing together until the texture becomes perfectly smooth. This step is one of the most critical parts of the entire process. If the batter isn't mixed properly, the cheesecake could bake unevenly, develop cracks, or lose the dense texture people expect. That's why technicians constantly monitor the ingredients. Quality control teams test dairy products in on-site food labs. Workers measure ingredients with digital scales. Every batch is checked before it moves to the next stage, because when a single mixing tank can produce enough batter for hundreds of cheesecakes, there's no room for mistakes. By the time the batter is finally ready, the factory is already preparing for the next step. And this is where things start to move very fast, because once the batter leaves the mixing room, it enters a production line capable of filling thousands of cheesecake molds in a single day. And that's where the real industrial magic begins. Every great cheesecake starts with something simple: the base. That crunchy, buttery layer at the bottom might seem small, but it plays a huge role in the final dessert. Inside the factory, the process begins with thousands of graham crackers. Industrial grinders crush them into fine crumbs, creating the familiar texture cheesecake lovers know so well. The crumbs fall into large containers where melted butter is added. Huge mixers slowly blend everything together until the mixture reaches the perfect consistency, not too dry and not too sticky. Because if the crust mixture isn't balanced correctly, the entire cheesecake could fall apart later. Once the mixture is ready, the production line begins to move. Rows of empty molds travel down long conveyor belts, each one waiting for the crust. Industrial press machines compress the crumb mixture firmly into the bottom of every mold. Hundreds of molds move forward at the same time, forming the foundation for future cheesecakes. Next comes the batter. Automated dispensers begin filling each mold with smooth cheesecake batter. Precision nozzles release the batter in carefully measured portions, so every cheesecake receives exactly the same amount. Sensors and industrial scales constantly monitor the flow. From above, the scene looks almost hypnotic. Perfect rows of molds moving forward while identical cheesecakes begin taking shape. And once the molds are filled, they're finally ready for the most important step of all: the ovens. Once the molds are filled, the cheesecakes are finally ready for the most critical stage of the entire process: baking. But inside a factory like this, baking doesn't happen in small kitchen ovens. Instead, hundreds of cheesecakes enter enormous tunnel ovens designed specifically for large-scale dessert production. Long conveyor belts slowly carry the trays forward, guiding them deep inside the massive heated chambers. From the outside, the ovens look like giant metal tunnels. But inside, the temperature is carefully controlled to create the perfect environment for cheesecake to bake evenly. Too much heat could crack the surface. Too little heat could leave the center undercooked. That's why workers constantly monitor digital control panels, adjusting temperatures and baking times throughout the day. As the trays travel through the ovens, something remarkable begins to happen. The batter slowly transforms. The edges firm up, the centers settle, and the smooth surface starts developing the rich golden color that signals a perfectly baked cheesecake. After the long journey through the heat, the cheesecakes finally emerge from the ovens. Warm air rises as the trays exit the baking tunnel. Rows of freshly baked cheesecakes move down the line, each one nearly identical to the next. But even though they're baked, they're not finished yet. Because before they can be sliced, packaged, or served in restaurants, they must go through another essential step: cooling. And in a factory producing thousands of cheesecakes, even that step requires careful precision. Once the cheesecakes leave the ovens, they may look completely finished. The surface is smooth, the edges are set, and the rich aroma fills the entire bakery. But baking is only one part of the process. Before these cheesecakes can move any further down the production line, they must cool down slowly and evenly. Inside the factory, trays of freshly baked cheesecakes enter long industrial cooling tunnels. Conveyor belts guide them forward while the temperature gradually begins to drop. Cooling may sound simple, but in large-scale food production, it requires extremely careful control. If a cheesecake cools too quickly, the surface can crack. If it cools too slowly, the texture can become too soft. That's why these cooling systems carefully regulate airflow and temperature throughout the entire tunnel. Rows of cheesecakes continue moving forward, slowly releasing heat as they travel deeper through the cooling system. At the same time, hundreds more sit on large metal racks inside refrigerated rooms designed to stabilize the desserts before the next stage begins. But cooling is also the moment when quality control becomes especially important. Workers carefully inspect the surfaces, searching for cracks, bubbles, or imperfections that might affect the final product. Some cheesecakes are approved immediately. Others may be removed from the line if they fail to meet strict quality standards. Because when thousands of cheesecakes are produced every single day, consistency matters more than anything. And once the cooling process is complete, the cheesecakes are finally ready for the next stage of production. After cooling, the cheesecakes finally reach the stage most customers recognize immediately: decoration. This is where the desserts begin transforming from simple baked cheesecakes into the colorful creations displayed in restaurant showcases. Inside the factory, entire sections of the production line are dedicated to toppings and finishing touches. Different cheesecakes move through different stations depending on the flavor being created. Some receive rich chocolate glaze poured smoothly across the surface. Others are topped with vibrant raspberry swirls that create striking patterns across the creamy filling. For certain varieties, workers add whipped cream by hand, carefully placing each portion to match the exact design used in restaurants. Chocolate lovers might see crushed cookies sprinkled over Oreo cheesecakes. Caramel fans get thick ribbons of salted caramel slowly dripping over the top. White chocolate is often drizzled in delicate patterns that give each cheesecake its signature look. Fruit varieties require even more care. Fresh strawberries may be placed one by one on top of the dessert. Blueberry or cherry toppings are gently spread across the surface to create a glossy finish. Even though the factory produces thousands of cheesecakes every day, decoration still requires a surprising amount of human attention. Workers constantly monitor the line, making small adjustments to keep every cheesecake looking identical, because presentation matters just as much as taste. Rows of beautifully finished cheesecakes move forward along the conveyor belts, each one nearly perfect. And when you see them all together, the variety is incredible. Chocolate, caramel, fruit, cookies, and countless other flavors. But once the decoration is finished, the cheesecakes still aren't ready for restaurants. They must go through one final step before leaving the factory: packaging. Once the cheesecakes are decorated, they are almost ready to leave the factory. But before they can travel to restaurants, they must go through one final stage: preservation and packaging. Fresh cheesecakes are extremely delicate. Their creamy texture and smooth surface can easily be damaged during transportation. To protect them, many cheesecakes first pass through powerful flash-freezing tunnels. Inside these chambers, extremely cold air surrounds the desserts, quickly locking in freshness and stabilizing the texture. After freezing, the cheesecakes move onto packaging lines where workers carefully place them into protective boxes. Each box is sealed and labeled before continuing down the conveyor system. Soon, stacks of cheesecake boxes begin filling the warehouse. Large pallets are prepared for shipping, and forklifts move the shipments into massive refrigerated storage areas. From there, delivery trucks arrive throughout the day to collect the desserts. Some shipments travel only a few hours to nearby restaurants. Others will cross entire regions before reaching their destination. Every day, trucks leave the factory carrying thousands of cheesecakes, and within a short time, those same desserts appear inside restaurant display cases, ready to be served to customers around the world. After traveling through massive factories, endless conveyor belts, and carefully controlled production lines, the journey of a single cheesecake finally comes to an end. What began as simple ingredients, cream cheese, eggs, sugar, and butter, has passed through giant mixers, industrial ovens, cooling tunnels, and decoration stations before reaching its final form. Thousands of cheesecakes follow this exact journey every single day inside enormous bakeries, each one moving through a system designed to maintain the same taste, texture, and quality customers expect in every slice. And yet when the dessert finally arrives at a table, none of that industrial scale is visible. All you see is a perfect slice, a creamy texture, a buttery crust that breaks with every bite, a dessert that feels simple, indulgent, and carefully crafted. But behind that single bite lies an entire operation working quietly behind the scenes. Factories running around the clock, machines and workers moving in perfect coordination, because what looks like an ordinary cheesecake is actually the result of one of the most fascinating dessert production systems in the world.